It was supposed to be a dream honeymoon, until the bride vanished without a trace. The salt spray felt like 1,000 tiny kisses against Ilara's skin. She leaned against the railing of the Serenity of the Seas, a behemoth of white steel, slicing through the turquoise waters of the Aegean. Her new husband, Liam, stood behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. The diamond on her finger, a stone so clear it seemed to have captured a piece of the sun, refracted the light into a dizzying kaleidoscope. It was perfect. All of it. The wedding had been a blur of lace and champagne, a fairy tale spun into reality. Now, this honeymoon was the happily ever after, a 2-week odyssey through ancient islands and sun-drenched ports. See that? Liam whispered, his voice a low rumble against her ear. He pointed towards a distant smudge of land, a hazy silhouette, against the brilliant blue horizon. That's Santorini, our first stop. They say the sunsets there can break your heart. Ilara smiled, a genuine soul-deep smile that reached her eyes. It can't be more beautiful than this. She turned in his arms, her simple white sundress fluttering in the sea breeze. She looked into his eyes, the color of warm honey, and felt a wave of love so potent it almost stole her breath. He was everything she had ever wanted: kind, ambitious, devastatingly handsome. He was the architect of her future, the man who had promised her forever. "Nothing is more beautiful than you," he murmured, leaning in to kiss her. The kiss was soft, lingering, a promise sealed with salt and sun. It was a moment suspended in time, a perfect photograph for the album of her memory. The ship was a floating city of opulence. That evening, they dined at the exclusive chef's table, a private alcove draped in velvet, where a Michelin-starred chef prepared a 10-course tasting menu just for them. Liam had arranged it all. He'd ordered vintage Dom Perignon and told her stories of his childhood, his voice weaving a tapestry of a life she was now inextricably a part of. Ilara felt a dizzying sense of belonging, a feeling she had craved for as long as she could remember. An orphan raised by a series of indifferent foster families, she had always felt like a ship without a harbor. Now, she had found her anchor. In Liam. After dinner, they strolled along the moonlit deck, the sound of a string quartet drifting from an upper lounge. The sea was a sheet of black glass, reflecting a sky littered with stars. Liam took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "I have another surprise for you," he said, a playful glint in his eyes. He led her to their stateroom, one of the ship's grand suites. The room was a palace of mahogany and cream, with a private balcony overlooking the endless expanse of the ocean. On the bed, nestled amongst a sea of rose petals, was a small, elegantly wrapped box. "Liam, you shouldn't have," she breathed, her heart fluttering. "Open it," he urged, his smile widening. Inside, cushioned on a bed of black velvet, was a necklace, a single flawless pearl, suspended from a delicate platinum chain. It was simple, elegant, perfect. It mirrored the pearl earrings her own mother had worn in the only photograph Ilara had of her. She'd shown it to Liam once, a faded, dog-eared picture she kept in her wallet. He had remembered. Tears welled in her eyes as he fastened the clasp around her neck. The pearl felt cool against her skin. She looked at their reflection in the vanity mirror. The woman staring back at her was radiant, adorned, loved. She didn't recognize her. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It's a family heirloom," Liam said softly, his hands resting on her shoulders. "It belonged to my grandmother. She wanted my wife to have it." The weight of the words, "my wife," settled over her, a warm, comforting blanket. She was his wife. She was part of a family. She belonged. They made love that night with a tender, desperate passion, a culmination of all the dreams they had built together. Afterwards, they lay entangled in the cool Egyptian cotton sheets, the sound of the waves a gentle lullaby. Ilara traced the lines of his face in the dim light, memorizing every contour, every shadow. "I love you, Liam," she whispered into the quiet of the room. "I love you more, Ilara," he replied, his voice already heavy with sleep. "More than you'll ever know." She fell asleep with his words echoing in her heart. A perfect end to a perfect day. She woke to the jarring, insistent ringing of the telephone. The room was still dark. The digital clock on the bedside table glowing with the numbers 3:17 a.m. Liam's side of the bed was empty. A sliver of unease, cold and sharp, pierced through her sleepy haze. "Hello," she answered, her voice groggy. "Mrs. Vance." The voice on the other end was clipped, official. "This is security. We're responding to a passenger alert. Is your husband with you?" The unease blossomed into a cold dread. "No, he's not here. I thought maybe he went for a walk." Her voice trailed off, the excuse sounding flimsy even to her own ears. "We found a man's shoe and a cell phone on the aft deck, near the railing. The phone is registered to a Mr. Liam Vance. We need you to come to the security office on deck." For immediately, the world tilted on its axis. The velvet-draped, champagne-filled dream shattered into a million pieces. The next few hours were a blur of fluorescent lights, hushed voices, and the sterile smell of disinfectant. She sat in a small, windowless office, the ship's security chief, a stern man with a face like a clenched fist, asking her questions she couldn't answer. When had she last seen him? What was his state of mind? Had they argued? The questions were a relentless barrage, each one a fresh wave of nausea. She clutched the pearl at her neck, its coolness a stark contrast to the fire of panic raging inside her. She told them about their perfect day, their perfect dinner, the perfect necklace. Her words sounded hollow, rehearsed, like a scene from a movie. The security chief's eyes were cold, skeptical. They showed her the shoe. A single, handmade Italian leather loafer, the kind Liam favored. They showed her the phone. Its screen was shattered, a spiderweb of cracks obscuring the smiling selfie they had taken just hours before. The ship was searched from bow to stern. Every cabin, every lounge, every storeroom. Divers were sent into the inky black water, their searchlights cutting futile swaths through the darkness. The sun rose over Santorini, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The heartbreakingly beautiful sunset Liam had promised her. But he wasn't there to see it. He was gone, vanished. As if the sea had opened its mouth and swallowed him whole. The days that followed were a living nightmare. The Greek authorities boarded the ship, their uniforms and grim faces a stark intrusion into the vessel's manufactured gaiety. Alara was confined to her suite, a prisoner in her gilded cage. The rose petals had been swept away, replaced by the yellow tape of a crime scene. She was questioned again and again by the ship's security, by the Greek police, by a stone-faced woman from the American embassy. Her story never wavered. Their perfect day, their perfect love. But in the cold, unforgiving light of interrogation rooms, her fairy tale began to sound like a lie. The narrative of the grieving widow started to fray at the edges, replaced by the whispers of the suspicious wife. Why was there no sign of a struggle? Why had no one heard anything? Why, in a ship teeming with thousands of people, had no one seen a thing? The questions hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The cruise was cut short. The serenity of the seas docked in Athens, its festive atmosphere replaced by a somber pall. The other passengers disembarked, their holiday chatter and laughter a cruel mockery of her grief. Ilara was escorted off the ship by two grim-faced police officers. A flock of reporters descending upon her like vultures, their cameras flashing. Their questions a cacophony of accusation. "Mrs. Vance, did you and your husband have a fight? Is it true you're the sole beneficiary of his life insurance policy? Did you push him?" The words hit her like physical blows. She stumbled, her vision blurring. The pearl necklace felt like a lead weight around her neck. Liam's family, his parents and his sister, arrived from New York. Their faces were masks of grief and suspicion. They looked at her not as a daughter, but as a murderer. Liam's mother, a formidable woman with eyes as cold as a winter sky, slapped her across the face in the lobby of the hotel. The crack echoed in the cavernous space, a sharp, ugly sound that drew the eyes of everyone present. "You killed my son," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "You never loved him. You only wanted his money. The accusation, so baseless, so cruel, was the final crack in Ilaro's fragile composure. The world she had so carefully constructed, the life she had so desperately wanted, had not just vanished. It had been a lie. A beautiful, elaborate, and deadly lie. And she was at the center of it. The Greek police officially named her a person of interest. Her passport was confiscated. She was alone, in a foreign country, accused of a crime she couldn't comprehend. The dream had become a nightmare from which she couldn't wake. One sweltering afternoon, a week after Liam had disappeared, a young, ambitious journalist named Chloe Dubois managed to slip past the police cordon at her hotel. She found Ilara on the rooftop terrace, staring out at the ancient silhouette of the Acropolis. "Mrs. Vance," Chloe began, her voice gentle but persistent. "I'm not like the others. I don't think you did it. But something is wrong with this story. The official narrative doesn't add up." Ilara turned, her eyes hollow, her face a pale, haunted mask. "What do you want?" "The truth," Chloe said, her gaze unwavering. "Your husband was a very wealthy man. He had powerful friends and powerful enemies. Did he ever mention anyone who might have wanted to harm him?" Ilara shook her head, a fresh wave of despair washing over her. "No. Everyone loved Liam." "No one is loved by everyone," Chloe countered softly. "Think, Ilara, was there anything unusual in the weeks leading up to your wedding? Any strange phone calls? Any hushed conversations?" A memory surfaced, a small, insignificant detail she had dismissed at the time. A few weeks before the wedding, she had walked into Liam's home office and found him on the phone, his voice low and tense. He had hung up abruptly when he saw her, a flicker of something she couldn't identify in his eyes. Fear, anger. "Who was that?" she had asked lightly. "Just business," he had replied, his smile a little too bright, a little too forced. "A deal that's getting complicated." She told Chloe about the incident. The journalist's eyes lit up with a predatory gleam. "Complicated how? What was the deal?" "I don't know," Ilara admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "He never talked about the details of his work. He said he wanted to protect me from it." "Protect you from what?" Chloe pressed. The question hung between them, a terrifying premonition. The sun beat down on the terrace, but Ilara felt a chill seep into her bones. The perfect man, the perfect marriage, the perfect life. It had all been a facade. And behind it, lurking in the shadows, was a truth so dark, it had the power to not only destroy her, but to swallow her whole, just as the sea had swallowed her husband. The cliffhanger wasn't just that Liam was gone, it was that the man she had married might never have existed at all. The real shock was the dawning, horrifying realization that she had been sleeping with a stranger. And now, that stranger's secrets were coming for her, Ilara Vance. Nee Collins was a ghost long before her husband vanished into the Aegean Sea. She was a product of the system, a file in a cabinet, a name on a list passed from one overworked social worker to another. Her childhood was a patchwork of strange houses and stranger faces, a constant lesson in the art of being invisible. To survive, she learned to be a chameleon, to blend into the background, to want for nothing, and therefore, risk nothing. She was a blank canvas, waiting for someone to paint a life onto her. And then came Liam. Liam Vance was not a man. He was a dynasty. The Vances were old money, their fortune built on steel and railroads, their name etched onto university buildings and museum wings. Liam was the heir apparent, groomed from birth to take the reins of the family empire. He was charming, brilliant, and carried the effortless confidence of a man who had never been told no. He moved through the world as if he owned it, and in many ways, he did. They met at a charity gala, one of those glittering affairs where the city's elite gathered to congratulate themselves on their generosity. Ilara was there as a junior event planner, a face in the crowd, tasked with ensuring the champagne flutes were never empty. He'd spotted her across the ballroom, a quiet island in a sea of noise. He'd approached her with a smile that could disarm armies, and for the first time in her life, Ilara felt seen. He pursued her with a single-minded intensity that was both flattering and terrifying. He showered her with gifts, whisked her away on private jets, introduced her to a world of unimaginable luxury. He saw the emptiness in her, and promised to fill it. He saw her as a beautiful, unspoiled vessel, and he was eager to pour his life, his name, his legacy into her. For Ilara, who had nothing, he was offering everything. She fell in love not just with the man, but with the life he promised, a life where she would finally matter. She ignored the faint, dissonant whispers in her soul, the moments when his charm felt like a performance, his kindness like a transaction. She was a ghost, and he was offering her a body. How could she refuse? The antagonist in this unfolding tragedy was not a person, but an entity, Vance Industries, and its heart was Liam's father, Julian Vance. A patriarch in the classical sense, Julian was a man forged from the same steel that had built his family's fortune. He was ruthless, calculating, and viewed the world as a chessboard on which he was the undisputed king. He saw his son not as a child, but as his most valuable asset, the continuation of his own legacy. When Liam brought Ilara home, Julian saw not a daughter-in-law, but a liability, a nobody, a gold digger with a pretty face and a blank past. He'd run a background check, of course. The results only confirmed his suspicions. Ilara Collins had no family, no connections, no history of any significance. She was a parasite, and he would not allow her to infect his bloodline. He had forbidden the marriage. The confrontation had been brutal, a clash of two formidable wills in the cavernous oak-paneled library of the Vance estate. She is beneath you, Liam. Julian had seethed, his voice a low, dangerous growl. She will be a stain on our name. Liam, for the first time in his life, had defied his father. I love her, he'd said, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and resolve. I will marry her, with or without your blessing. The declaration of war had been made. Julian Vance was not a man who lost. If he could not control his son, he would destroy the source of his rebellion. He began a quiet, insidious campaign to undermine the relationship. He would make casual, cutting remarks about Ilara's background at family dinners. He would accidentally leave financial reports on the coffee table, detailing the prenuptial agreement his lawyers were drafting, an agreement that would leave Ilara with nothing should the marriage fail. He was a master of psychological warfare, and Ilara was his target. She felt his disapproval like a physical weight, a constant, suffocating pressure. But she clung to Liam, her love for him a shield against the old man's venom. And then there was the witness, the hidden player in this deadly game. Her name was Sophia. She was the Vance's maid, a young woman from a small village in the Philippines, whose life was a world away from the opulent splendor of the family she served. Sophia was invisible, just as Ilara had once been. She moved through the grand house like a phantom, her presence acknowledged only when something was needed. She saw everything and said nothing. Her silence was her shield. Her job, the lifeline that supported her family back home. Sophia had been cleaning the library the day of the great confrontation between Liam and his father. She had hidden behind the heavy velvet curtains, her heart pounding in her chest as the ugly words flew between them. She had seen the raw hatred in Julian's eyes, a look so venomous it had made her blood run cold. But it was what she heard after Liam stormed out that had truly terrified her. She heard Julian make a phone call. His voice was low, stripped of all emotion, the voice of a man giving an order. It's time, he had said. The problem needs to be removed permanently. Make it look like an accident, a tragedy. The grieving widow will be taken care of. No loose ends. Sophia's world had shrunk to the space behind the curtain. She was trapped, a witness to a conspiracy she couldn't comprehend. To speak up would be to lose everything. Her job, her visa, her family's future. To remain silent would be to become an accomplice to murder. She was paralyzed by fear, her conscience a screaming, helpless prisoner. She saw the way Julian Vance looked at Ilara, the way a predator eyes its prey. She saw the countdown in his cold, dead eyes. The weeks leading up to the wedding were thick with a tension that was almost unbearable. Liam became distant, his easy charm replaced by a haunted, preoccupied air. He started drinking heavily, his nights filled with hushed, angry phone calls from his office. Ilara tried to reach him, to break through the wall he was building around himself. But he would just smile, his strained, handsome smile, and tell her not to worry. "It's just pressure from my father," he would say. "He'll come around." But Ilara knew it was more than that. She could feel the ground shifting beneath her feet. The fairy tale was unraveling, the dream turning sour. She saw the way Julian watched her, his gaze a physical violation. She felt like an insect under a magnifying glass, the sun's rays concentrating, about to set her on fire. The wedding itself was a spectacular, hollow affair, a performance for the benefit of society pages. Julian Vance played the part of the proud father, his smile, a grotesque mask. He gave a toast that was a masterpiece of passive aggression, praising his son's bold choices and welcoming Ilara to a family she would no doubt find challenging. Sophia served champagne at the reception, her hands trembling so badly she nearly dropped her tray. She watched Ilara, a vision in white lace, dancing with her new husband, and felt a profound, sickening pity. The bride was a lamb being led to the slaughter, and everyone was applauding. Sophia's gaze met Julian's across the crowded room. He looked directly at her, and for a fleeting, terrifying moment, his mask slipped. He gave her a look of pure, unadulterated menace, a silent warning. "You saw nothing. You heard nothing." Sophia fled to the kitchens, her heart hammering against her ribs. On the honeymoon, the first few days were a desperate attempt by Liam to recapture the magic. He was overly attentive, his gestures of affection almost frantic. He was trying to outrun the shadow that was chasing them, the shadow of his father. Ilara, wanting so desperately to believe in the dream, allowed herself to be swept along. The pearl necklace was not just a gift, it was a desperate plea. "See, we are real. This is real." But the night he disappeared, the facade had finally crumbled. After they made love, after the whispers of "I love you," Ilara had woken up to find Liam on the balcony, his back to her, staring out at the Black Sea. He was holding his phone, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Liam," Shia had whispered, coming up behind him, "what's wrong?" He flinched, startled by her presence. He turned, and in the moonlight, she saw the tears glistening on his cheeks. His face was a mask of pure anguish. "It's my father," he choked out, his voice raw with pain. "He's won. He always wins." "What are you talking about?" Ilara asked, her own fear a rising tide. "He gave me an ultimatum," Liam confessed, the words tumbling out in a torrent of despair. "It's you or the company. The inheritance, everything. If I stay married to you, he's going to cut me off, disown me, ruin me." He let out a harsh, broken laugh. "He said he'd rather see me dead than with you." The cruelty of it stole her breath. "So what are we going to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. Liam looked at her, his honey eyes filled with a terrible, bottomless sorrow. "There's nothing to do. It's over. He's already set things in motion. He's going to destroy you, Ilara. He's going to make it look like you're a fraud, a criminal. He's going to erase you," he told me. "He told me he had people who would take care of it." The implication was horrifying, unthinkable. Take care of it? What does that mean? But Liam just shook his head, a single tear tracing a path through the stubble on his jaw. "I'm so sorry, Ilara. I was a fool. I thought I could protect you. I thought my love was enough." He reached out and touched the pearl at her neck. "He knows about this. He said it was a mistake to give it to you. That you weren't worthy." He leaned in and kissed her, a desperate, final kiss. It tasted of salt and regret. "I have to go," he whispered against her lips. "It's the only way to keep you safe. Disappear. They can't hurt you if they can't find you." "No, Liam, don't," she cried, clinging to him. "We can run away. We can start over." But he gently pried her hands from his arms. He would find us. He would never stop. He looked at her one last time, his eyes pleading with her to understand. "Live, Ilara, live a full life for me," and then he was gone. He slipped out of the suite, leaving her alone with the echo of his words and the cold, hard reality of their situation. She didn't know if he had jumped, or if he had been met on the deck by his father's people. She only knew he was gone. The official story was a man overboard, a tragic accident. But Ilara knew the truth. It wasn't an accident. It was an execution, and she was the next target. The injustice was not just that her husband was dead. It was that his own father had signed his death warrant, and she was being framed for the crime. The conflict was no longer about a missing person. It was about a grieving widow against a ruthless billionaire who held all the cards, a man who would burn the world to the ground to protect his name. The days bled into a week of suffocating heat and relentless interrogation. Ilara's hotel room in Athens became her prison, the Parthenon a distant, mocking symbol of a civilization built on laws she could no longer trust. Julian Vance's influence was a palpable force, a poison seeping into every corner of her life. The Greek police, once sympathetic, now treated her with a thinly veiled contempt. Their questions became more pointed, more accusatory. They produced bank statements, obtained with alarming speed, showing a recent transfer of $1 million from a joint account she shared with Liam into her own personal, previously empty account. The transfer was dated the day before he disappeared, a nest egg, Mrs. Vance. The lead detective, a man named Pappas, with a drooping mustache and weary eyes, asked, sliding the statement across the metal table. "For your new life, without your husband, Liam transferred that money," she insisted, her voice hoarse. "He told me to take it," he said I would need it." Pappas exchanged a skeptical glance with his partner. How convenient. A man about to tragically fall off a cruise ship has the foresight to provide his loving wife with $1 million parting gift. The narrative was being written for her, each detail a new nail in her coffin. The media, fueled by anonymous leaks from sources close to the Vance family, painted her as a cold, calculating black widow. Tabloids ran lurid headlines. Honeymoon horror, did bride push groom for billions? They dug up her past, her foster care history twisted into a sob story designed to highlight her desperation for money and status. She was the gutter rat who had seduced a prince and then disposed of him when he was no longer useful. Liam's family was relentless. His mother, Eleanor, gave a tearful, televised interview from the family's Park Avenue apartment, clutching a framed photo of Liam. "My son was blinded by love," she sobbed, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. "This woman, is a predator." She saw our family's wealth and she pounced. Liam was starting to see her for what she was. He was having second thoughts. "I believe they argued that night. I believe she killed him." The betrayal was absolute. These were the people whose family she was supposed to have joined. Now they were leading the mob that was calling for her head. The injustice was a physical thing, a constant ache in her chest. She was being erased, her identity replaced by a monstrous caricature. Chloe Dubois, the journalist, was her only ally, a lone voice of skepticism in a chorus of condemnation. She would visit Ilara, smuggling in food and coffee, her notebook filled with frantic scribbles. "They're building a perfect cage for you, Ilara," Chloe said one evening, her face grim. "Julian Vance is pulling all the strings. The police, the media, he owns them all. We need something he can't control. We need proof." "Proof of what?" Ilara asked, her spirits worn down to a nub. "That my husband's father is a monster. Who would believe me?" "We have to find Sophia," Chloe insisted. "The maid, if she heard what you think she heard, she's the key. She's the only one who can corroborate your story." But finding Sophia was impossible. The day after the family returned to New York, Sophia had been dismissed. She had vanished as completely as Liam had. Julian Vance was tying up his loose ends. The antagonist grew bolder. Julian, feeling his victory was assured, flew to Athens. He announced a press conference on the steps of the hotel where Ilara was being held. It was a masterstroke of public relations cruelty. He stood before a forest of microphones, the picture of a grieving father. His voice heavy with sorrow. "My family is offering a $5 million reward for any information that leads to the conviction of the person responsible for my son's death," he announced, his cold eyes scanning the crowd. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "We will not rest until there is justice for Liam." It was a public declaration of war, aimed directly at Ilara. He was not just accusing her, he was putting a price on her head. The pressure on the Greek authorities intensified tenfold. They had to make an arrest, and there was only one suspect. That night, the humiliation escalated. Under the glare of television cameras, Ilara was taken from her hotel in handcuffs. The click of the metal around her wrists was the sound of the cage door slamming shut. She was paraded through a gauntlet of reporters, their flashbulbs a blinding, disorienting assault. She saw Julian Vance watching from the hotel entrance, a flicker of triumphant satisfaction in his eyes. It was a public shaming, a modern-day witch trial. She was taken to a holding cell, a cold concrete box that smelled of bleach and despair. The thin mattress was stained, the single blanket threadbare. The reality of her situation crashed down on her with the force of a physical blow. She was alone, friendless, and about to be charged with the murder of the man she loved. A crime orchestrated by his own father. The power imbalance was absolute. He was a king in his castle, and she was a peasant in his dungeon. Sleep was impossible. The sounds of the jail, the clanging of doors, the distant shouts, the weeping of another prisoner, were a constant torment. She lay on the cot, the pearl necklace still around her neck, its coolness a ghostly reminder of a life that no longer existed. It was the only thing she had left of him. In New York, Sophia was living her own nightmare. She had been given a generous severance package, hush money, and a one-way ticket back to Manila. She was staying with a cousin in a cramped apartment. In Queens, waiting for her flight, her mind a whirlwind of fear and guilt. She watched the news, saw Alara's face plastered across the screen, the word murderer branded on her. Every time she saw the report, she felt Julian Vance's cold eyes on her, his silent threat echoing in her ears. Her conscience was at war with her fear. Her family's survival depended on her silence. But the image of Ilara, so lost and alone, haunted her. She knew the truth. She knew Ilara was innocent. The weight of that knowledge was crushing her. One night, unable to sleep, she walked to a small 24-hour chapel she had found a few blocks away. She knelt in the back pew, the scent of old incense and melting wax a small comfort. She prayed for guidance, for courage, for a sign. As she was leaving, she saw a stack of newspapers by the door. The front page of the New York Post featured a large, unflattering photo of Ilara being led away in handcuffs. The headline screamed, "Billion-dollar bride caged." Something inside Sophia snapped. The fear that had paralyzed her was suddenly eclipsed by a surge of righteous anger. This was wrong. Utterly, fundamentally wrong. She could not live with herself if she let an innocent woman rot in a foreign prison while a powerful man got away with murder. She walked out of the chapel and into the cool night air, a new resolve hardening her features. She took out her phone, her fingers trembling as she typed a name into the search bar, Chloe Dubois. The journalist's articles on the case had been the only ones that hinted at Ilara's innocence. Her contact information was on her professional website. Sophia took a deep breath and pressed the call button. She was a witness, trapped between her fear and her conscience. She had chosen her side. She would no longer be a pawn in Julian Vance's cruel game. She would be the one to burn his kingdom to the ground. The conflict had escalated. The victim was caged, the antagonist was triumphant. But the hidden witness was about to change the entire game. The call came in the dead of night. Chloe Dubois was asleep in her cluttered Athens apartment, the glow of her laptop casting long shadows on the walls covered in notes, timelines and photographs of the Vances. The shrill ring of her burner phone, the one she used for sensitive sources, jolted her awake. She saw the international prefix and her heart leaped. "Dubois," she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Is this Chloe Dubois, the reporter?" The voice on the other end was small, hesitant, heavily accented. "It is. Who is this?" "My name is Sophia. I was the maid for the Vance family." Chloe sat bolt upright, suddenly wide awake. Adrenaline surged through her veins. "Sophia, my God, where are you? Are you safe?" "I am in New York. I am supposed to fly home tomorrow, but I cannot. I cannot be quiet anymore." Her voice broke, a sob catching in her throat. "What he is doing to Mrs. Vance. It is a sin." "Sophia, listen to me very carefully," Chloe said, her voice low and urgent. "Do not talk to anyone else. Do not go anywhere. I will get the first flight to New York. Can you stay hidden for 24 hours? "Yes," Sophia whispered. "I will wait." The next 24 hours were a frantic race against time. Chloe booked a flight, packed a bag, and sent a coded email to her editor. Before she left for the airport, she paid one last visit to ELARA. The visiting room of the Corridalos women's prison was a bleak, soulless place. Alara sat behind a thick pane of plexiglass, looking pale and fragile in the drab prison jumpsuit. The fire in her eyes had been extinguished, replaced by a dull, vacant resignation. "They're charging me tomorrow," Alara said, her voice flat. "My lawyer says they have a strong case. The money, the insurance policy, the family's testimony. He says I should consider a plea bargain." "Don't you dare," Chloe said, leaning close to the glass. "You are not pleading guilty to anything. I need you to hold on, Ilara, just a little longer. I think I've found something." A flicker of hope, faint but discernible, returned to Ilara's eyes. "What is it?" "I can't say yet. It's too dangerous, but don't give up. Not yet." Chloe's flight to JFK was the longest 10 hours of her life. She spent the entire time going over her notes, her mind racing, trying to piece together the puzzle. She knew Sophia's testimony alone might not be enough. It would be the word of a dismissed made against one of the most powerful men in the world. Julian Vance's lawyers would tear her apart on the stand, paint her as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge or a payout. Chloe needed more. She needed something irrefutable. A smoking gun. She met Sophia in a small anonymous diner in Queens. The young woman was terrified, her eyes darting nervously towards the door every time someone entered. Chloe bought her coffee and gently coaxed the story out of her. Sophia recounted the argument between Liam and Julian, her voice barely a whisper. And then she told Chloe about the phone call she had overheard. "He said to make it look like an accident," Sophia repeated, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. "He said, no loose ends." "Did you recognize the voice on the other end of the call?" Chloe asked, her pen flying across her notepad. Sophia shook her head. "No, it was a man. His voice was cold, like a machine." Chloe's heart sank. It was still one person's word against another's. "Sophia, think. Is there anything else? Anything you saw? Anything you found, no matter how small?" Sophia squeezed her eyes shut, concentrating. "After the family left for Greece, Mr. Vance told me to clear out Mr. Liam's home office. He said he wanted it turned into a guest room. He was in a hurry. He wanted everything gone." "What did you do with the contents?" "I packed them in boxes. They are in the basement of the main house. But there was one thing. I found it when I was cleaning his desk." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a small, unassuming object. It was a silver USB flash drive, the kind you could buy in any electronics store. It was taped to the underside of the desk drawer, Sophia explained. "It seemed like he had hidden it there. I don't know why, but I felt I should take it. I thought maybe it was important." Chloe's breath caught in her throat. This was it, the hidden clue, the potential bombshell. She took the flash drive from Sophia's trembling hand. It felt heavy, freighted with significance. "Did the right thing, Sophia," Chloe said, her voice filled with a newfound excitement. "You have been incredibly brave." Chloe left Sophia with a trusted contact, a lawyer who specialized in witness protection, and raced back to her hotel room. Her hands shook as she plugged the flash drive into her laptop. The drive was password protected. Of course it was. Chloe's mind raced through the possibilities. Dates, names, places. She tried Liam's birthday. Access denied. She tried Elara's birthday. Access denied. She tried the name of his favorite dog, his mother's maiden name, the name of his first boat. Nothing. She was about to give up in frustration when she remembered something Elara had told her, a small, intimate detail from her fairy tale romance. Liam had a favorite quote from a poem they had both loved. "My soul's sworn friend." She typed it in, no spaces, all lowercase. "My soul's sworn friend." Access granted. The drive contained only one file, a video file. The file name was Insurance. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs as she double-clicked it. The video flickered to life. It was Liam. He was in his home office, the same one Sophia had described. He was looking directly into the camera of his laptop, his face pale and drawn. He looked like a man on his way to his own execution. The date stamp in the corner of the screen was from the day before he and Elara had left for their honeymoon. "If you are watching this," he began, his voice strained, "it means I'm dead. And it means my father killed me." Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. It was a confession from beyond the grave. For months, Liam continued, his voice a low, pained monotone. "My father has been trying to force me to end my relationship with Elara Collins, the woman I love, the woman I was supposed to spend my life with. I refused. And so, he decided to eliminate the problem. Both of us." The video was a detailed, chilling account of Julian Vance's criminal enterprise. Liam explained that Vance Industries was not just a steel company. It was a front for a massive international money laundering operation, funneling billions for drug cartels and rogue states. Liam had discovered the truth by accident and had been trying to find a way to expose his father without destroying the family name. "He found out, I knew," Liam said, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "He gave me a choice. I could either play along, marry the daughter of one of his business partners to solidify an alliance and keep my mouth shut, or he would have me and Elara disposed of." He took a shaky breath. "I chose a third option. I pretended to go along with his plan to get rid of Elara. I told him I would take her on this cruise, and that his associates could handle it there. Make it look like she fell. A tragic accident. He believed me. He thought I was finally coming to my senses, choosing the family over the girl." Tears streamed down Chloe's face as she listened to the dead man's testimony. "But it was a lie," Liam said, his voice cracking. "I was never going to let him hurt her. The plan is to get her off that ship, give her a new identity, and enough money to disappear forever. I've arranged everything. As for me, I'm the loose end. I know too much. My father can't risk me changing my mind, or my conscience getting the better of me. Once Elara is safe, his men will come for me. I know this. This video, the documents on this drive, this is Elara's insurance policy. It's the only thing that will keep her safe after I'm gone. If they come after her, if they try to frame her for my death, which I have no doubt they will, this is the truth. My father, Julian Vance, is a monster, a murderer, and he is responsible for my death." He looked directly into the camera, his eyes pleading. "Elara, if you're seeing this, I am so sorry. I love you. I always will live. Please, just live." The screen went black. Chloe sat in stunned silence, the sound of her own ragged breathing filling the quiet hotel room. The plot twist was more shocking, more diabolical than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just a family dispute. It was a vast criminal conspiracy, a story of unimaginable corruption and greed. Liam hadn't been a victim of his father's disapproval, he had been a casualty of his criminal empire. He had sacrificed himself to save the woman he loved. The stakes had just shifted seismically. This was no longer about freeing an innocent woman. This was about taking down one of the most powerful and dangerous men in the world. It was about exposing a scandal that would rock the foundations of Wall Street and international politics. Chloe held the trigger in her hand. The only question was when, and how, to pull it. The full conspiracy had emerged, and the tension had just cranked up to a level that was almost unbearable. The cinematic payoff had to be just as explosive. The plan was audacious, risky, and had to be executed with military precision. Chloe knew that if she simply handed the flash drive to the authorities, it could be buried, dismissed, or lost in the labyrinth of Julian Vance's influence. Justice for Liam and Ilara couldn't be delivered in a quiet office or a closed courtroom. It had to be public. It had to be undeniable. It had to be an explosion. She spent the next 48 hours in a blur of encrypted calls and clandestine meetings, pulling together a small trusted team, her editor at the New York Chronicle, a fiercely independent investigative journalist, the lawyer representing Sophia, and a tech wizard who owed Chloe a favor. The target was the annual Vance Foundation Charity Ball, the crown jewel of New York's philanthropic calendar. Scheduled to take place in 3 days at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was Julian Vance's night of triumph, where he would be honored for his lifetime of charitable giving. It was the perfect stage for his downfall. The first step was to get Ilara out of Greece. With the video as leverage, Chloe's editor made a quiet high-level call to a contact at the State Department. He didn't reveal the full story, only that they had irrefutable evidence of a conspiracy that would be a major international embarrassment if an innocent American citizen was left to rot in a foreign jail. Within hours, the political gears began to turn. The charges against Ella were abruptly and inexplicably dropped due to insufficient evidence. She was released from prison, her passport returned, and put on the next flight to New York, all under a cloak of diplomatic silence. Julian Vance, furious and blindsided, was told it was a temporary setback, a procedural issue. He had no idea. The tidal wave that was about to hit him, Ilara arrived in New York, a ghost of her former self, and was whisked away to a secure location. Chloe showed her the video. Watching Liam's last message was an agony beyond words. Ilara wept, a raw guttural sound of grief and love and rage. The man she had mourned as a victim of his father's cruelty was, in fact, a hero who had orchestrated his own death to save her. The revelation didn't lessen the pain, but it transformed it. Her grief was now forged with a steely resolve. She was no longer just a victim, she was the keeper of his legacy, the executor of his final wish. Justice. The night of the ball was electric with anticipation. The Great Hall of the Met was a glittering spectacle of power and wealth. Diamonds glittered, champagne flowed, and the air hummed with the self-congratulatory chatter of the global elite. Julian Vance was the man of the hour, accepting accolades. With a practiced, humble grace, he stood on the stage, bathed in the warm glow of the spotlights. A portrait of philanthropy and power. Chloe and her team were already in position. The tech wizard had, with surprising ease, hacked into the museum's audiovisual system. Sophia, her face disguised by makeup and a wig, was with her lawyer in the wings, ready to be escorted onto the stage by pre-arranged security guards who were loyal to Chloe's editor. Not to Vance. Ilara was watching from a secure live feed, her heart pounding. The plan was to let Julian have his moment. Let him soak in the applause. Let him deliver his self-aggrandizing speech. The higher the pedestal, the harder the fall. Dodron approached the podium, the applause thundering through the hall. "My friends," he began, his voice resonating with false sincerity, "to receive this honor is the privilege of a lifetime. But it is a bittersweet moment. As many of you know, my family has recently suffered an unimaginable tragedy. The loss of my beloved son, Liam." He paused, lowering his head as if overcome with emotion. The crowd murmured in sympathy. "My son was a brilliant young man, with a bright future. But he was taken from us. And while the person responsible for his death may have temporarily evaded justice, I promise you, I will not rest until his memory is honored and the truth is known." It was the perfect cue. The truth. A voice echoed through the hall, amplified by the sound system. "Let's talk about the truth, Mr. Vance." Heads turned. The voice was Chloe's. She stood up from her table, a microphone in her hand. On the two enormous screens flanking the stage, where a slideshow of Julian's charitable works had been playing, the image suddenly switched. It was the video. Liam's face, pale and haunted, filled the screens. Panic flashed in Julian's eyes. He barked at the technicians in the wings, but they were no longer taking his orders. The sound of Liam's voice, clear and damning, filled the cavernous hall. "If you are watching this, it means I'm dead. And it means my father killed me." A collective gasp swept through the audience. Phones were instantly raised, recording the unbelievable scene. The glittering facade of the evening shattered. Julian Vance stood frozen at the podium, his face a mask of disbelief and fury, the spotlight now a harsh, unforgiving glare. The video played in its entirety. The story of the money laundering, the threats, the diabolical plot to murder Alara, the heart-wrenching sacrifice Liam had made. The silence in the hall was absolute, broken only by Liam's disembodied voice and the occasional sob from someone in the crowd. When the video ended with Liam's final desperate plea to Alara, the screens went black. For a moment, no one moved. The shock was too profound. Then, Chloe's voice cut through the silence again. "Julian Vance did not just murder his son. He is the head of a criminal enterprise that has propped up dictators and funded wars. And we have the proof." As she spoke, the screens lit up again. This time with a dizzying scroll of documents from the flash drive, bank records, shipping manifests, encrypted emails. It was an avalanche of evidence, undeniable and catastrophic. Julian lunged for the microphone, his face contorted in a snarl of pure rage. "Lies. This is a fabrication. A slanderous attack by my enemies." But it was too late. The spell was broken. The man they had been applauding moments before was a monster. As he raved, two figures walked onto the stage. It was Sophia, her disguise removed, her face filled with a quiet, terrified courage, and her lawyer. "My name is Sophia Reyes," she said, her voice trembling, but clear. "I worked for the Vance family. I heard Julian Vance give the order to have his son killed. The final blow, the public accusation, the live-streamed confession. It was a courtroom bombshell delivered in the heart of high society." Chaos erupted. Reporters were shouting questions. People were scrambling for the exits, distancing themselves from the toxic fallout. Through the pandemonium, a line of grim-faced FBI agents, tipped off by Chloe's editor just moments before the video played, marched into the hall. They moved with a calm, deliberate purpose, parting the panicked crowd like the Red Sea. They walked directly onto the stage, past the stunned security guards, and surrounded Julian Vance. "Julian Vance," the lead agent said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, and suspicion of murder." The click of the handcuffs was deafening in the suddenly quiet hall. The great Julian Vance, the King of New York, was being led away in disgrace, his empire crumbling around him on live television, his public honor turning to public shame in the most spectacular way imaginable. From her hidden location, Alara watched the scene unfold, tears streaming down her face. They were tears of grief, of vindication, of a terrible, cathartic release. It wasn't a victory. Liam was still gone. But it was justice. Explosive, public, and absolute. The cinematic payoff was complete. The monster had been exposed, his kingdom turned to ash, all broadcast live to a shocked and horrified world. Liam's final act had not been in vain. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The Vance scandal dominated the global news cycle for weeks. It was a story with everything: murder, betrayal, fabulous wealth, and a level of corporate corruption that was breathtaking in its scope. Vance Industries collapsed overnight, its stock price plummeting to zero before trading was suspended indefinitely. The company's assets were frozen, its board members arrested, and its dark underbelly exposed for the world to see. The tendrils of the conspiracy reached far and wide, leading to a cascade of arrests and resignations in boardrooms and government offices across the globe. The Vance name, once a symbol of power and prestige, was now synonymous with disgrace. Julian, Vance never saw the outside of a prison cell again. Faced with an insurmountable mountain of evidence and the damning testimony of dozens of former associates all scrambling to save themselves, he was convicted on multiple counts of racketeering, conspiracy, and murder. The judge, calling him a man of unfathomable greed and moral depravity, sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He died of a heart attack in a maximum security federal penitentiary less than a year later, a forgotten man whose empire had turned to dust. Elara, with the help of Chloe and a team of lawyers, navigated the legal and financial maelstrom that followed. The life insurance policy, which Julian had intended to use as a weapon against her, became hers. So did a significant portion of Liam's personal fortune, which had been held in trusts separate from the tainted corporate entity. She was, by the world's standards, a wealthy woman. But the money felt like ashes in her hands. It was blood money, the price of her husband's life. She did not want the life of a socialite, a tragic widow living off her inheritance. That life had been a lie, a beautiful cage she had been lucky to escape. She wanted a life of purpose, a life that would honor the man Liam had truly been, not the prince he had pretended to be, but the hero who had sacrificed himself for her. With Chloe Dubois, who had won a Pulitzer Prize for her reporting and had become Elara's closest friend, she established the Liam Vance Foundation. It was not one of the self-congratulatory philanthropic fronts his father had created. Its mission was to provide legal aid and support for victims of wrongful accusations, for the voiceless and the powerless, for people like the woman Elara had been, trapped in a system designed to crush them. She sold the opulent penthouse, the designer clothes, the jewelry. She kept only one thing, the pearl necklace. It was a constant, tangible reminder of the love that had been real, even when everything else was a lie. It was a symbol of his final, desperate act of protection. Years passed. The scandal faded from the headlines, replaced by new outrages, new tragedies. Elara found a quiet, anonymous life. She never remarried. Her love for Liam, the real Liam, was a closed circle, a complete and finished story. She found a different kind of love, a different kind of fulfillment, in her work with the foundation. She found a family in the people she helped, in the lives she changed. She was no longer a ghost, no longer a blank canvas. She was a woman forged in fire, her identity etched not by a name or a fortune, but by her own resilience and strength. One cool autumn afternoon, she drove out to a small, secluded cemetery overlooking the ocean, a few hours from the city. There, under the shade of a weeping willow, was a simple granite headstone. It didn't bear the name Vance, it simply said, Liam 19882023. My soul's sworn friend. There was no body buried beneath it. Liam's final resting place was the sea, vast and mysterious. The stone was just a place for her to come, a place to remember. She laid a small bouquet of white roses at its base, the same flowers that had been in her wedding bouquet. She stood there for a long time, the sea breeze tugging at her hair, the sound of the waves a distant, mournful sigh. There was a bittersweet peace in the air, a sense of healing, but also a haunting echo of the cost of it all. The pain of his loss had not disappeared, but it had changed. It was no longer a raw open wound, but a part of her, a scar that testified to the battle she had survived. She reached up and touched the pearl at her neck. It was warm from her skin. She looked out at the endless horizon, the line where the blue of the water met the pale gray of the sky. The sunset, she thought, was heartbreakingly beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, she was able to watch it without wanting to cry. The story was over, the justice delivered, the truth revealed. But the love, and the loss, would remain forever, a lingering, haunting, emotional echo.